Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Sorry,
Hello
Mike.
everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Mike Short, I'm from Alliance, Director of Wireless In-Building and DAS. My contact details are shown there if you ever need to contact me. We're going to do a brief overview of Alliance. We are a leading distributor of wireless infrastructure products, superior supply chain solutions. We have an extensive inventory, warehouses throughout U.S., Canada, and CALA, 8 facilities in North America currently with 2 scheduled to open in 2014. We provide technical support, training, and we have an industry-leading line of experts and recommendations from industry veterans within the company. Some of the solutions we provide are microwave backhaul, infrastructure products, anything that to do with a tower or rooftop situation, as well as fiber to the antenna and connectorization, and supply chain, being able to get to all those products to you in the right amount of time and at the right price. We also have an extensive line of DAS solutions. On the outdoor side, we have cabinets, antennas, cabling, and backhaul solutions. And then indoor antennas and cabling and passive products as well for any situation required. A little briefer or a little more detailed look on our infrastructure side. So cable, we have fiber and coax as well as fiber to the antenna. We are specialists in custom fiber to the antenna solutions as well as antennas themselves. We are one of the largest distributors in the world of base station antennas. We also have an extensive line of tower accessories and, as previous mentioned, some of the DAS solutions for indoor and outdoor, small cell, any DAS cabling required, antennas, passives, and anything required that way, as well as a lot of low PIM solutions. This is the first of the webinar series. The second one will be taking place on May 21st. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Rigney from Solid. Dennis is the VP of Sales for North America, and Dennis is going to be talking to you about densification of the network, indoors and outdoors, and going to take a look at the needs and requirements from the perspective of stakeholders. Additionally, he's going to take a look at industry trends and all-optical infrastructure and amplifier technology and some other issues as well. Please go ahead, Dennis. Thanks.
Thanks for the introduction, Mike. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. As Mike mentioned, my name is Dennis Rigney, VP of Sales for Solid here out of New Jersey. Looking forward to stepping through the challenge of densifying the network indoor through DAS and small cell. To begin, we've all experienced the inability to make a call or send a file in an area where we know there's coverage. That experience is really due to the capacity crunch where the macro network gets saturated during certain times, and the coverage and capacity in today's world is really akin to kind of like, if you look at that, the macro level, it's really akin to kind of like a lamp where it provides coverage or natural light, but in many cases needs to be augmented by additional solutions to completely light a room. That general concept is what we call network densification, the ability to, on a macro level, provide wireless coverage and then fill pockets, not only for coverage but also for capacity for the data networks that are used. The wireless market is about to undergo many changes, and with change comes disruption. The opportunity for new types of technology exist today, and to be sure, we believe that the market will experience not only an evolution, but also a revolution in strategies for densifying the network. Solid's grateful to our partner Alliance Corporation for the opportunity to present today. We'll explore across 2 webinars the problem and solutions and trends for densifying the network. Today, we'll first examine indoor space, and then later this month, we'll talk about exploring outdoor spaces and what type of technologies exist there. So we'll go ahead and get started. Our goal here at Solid is to keep people connected and safe in a rapidly changing world through a portfolio of densification solutions that include RF amplifiers, RF radios, optical transport. Our DAS solutions have been deployed at some of the world's best-known venues, including things like the New York City subway, the Daytona Speedway, some large healthcare like Kaiser Permanente, transportation hubs, McCarran Airport, and then also universities and professional sports arenas like Oregon University or the Washington Nationals ballpark. In fact, there's some solid equipment in the TTC in Toronto underground as well. Our optical transport solutions include small cell. They include backhaul and front haul for remote radio heads. They've been battle tested by SK Telecom, where our gear is front hauling one of the world's first and largest centralized RAN networks. Solid is also innovating future solutions that provide truly scalable and multi-purpose common infrastructure, as well as amplifiers that are smaller, lighter, and greener, while delivering more powerful and support more bands. So what are the pain points? The pain points of coverage and capacity and spectrum. As we just discussed in the above example, there's a coverage and capacity problem that manifests itself into blocked or dropped calls. That's kind of the end user experience. In addition to that, more frustrating, I think, to the end users today are inconsistent data speeds, which really talks to the capacity part. So drops and blocks we're probably all somewhat used to from the, do I have 5 bars, do I have a green light days. Today is more, inconsistent data speeds. Can I send that? Do I have enough throughput to send that picture, to send that email, whatever it may be? In North America, IGR expects that by 2017, the consumption of mobile data per month will increase more than 6 times over its level in 2012. But here's the deeper issue that gets lost in the statistic. Within any given geographic market, there will be locations where the mobile data network will be unable to meet the average level of data demand simply due to the larger number of users. So at any one given time, if there's a pocket of users that typically wouldn't be there and the network is not built to support them, that market, that's an unforeseen circumstance, and that market, that network in that place, at that location, will suffer dramatically. Specifically, IGR has modeled the bandwidth demands and network capacity for several markets and shown that pain points exist where pain points exist in the market, in the network. For example, in Chicago, IGR forecasts that by 2017, the demand for mobile data that exceeds the network capacity will be 16 times greater than it was in 2012. In other words, while the average demand for the mobile data may only increase by 6 times, the demand at specific times in Chicago will actually increase by a factor of 16. The reason for the capacity crunch, what's the reason for it? Since the launch of the iPhone, there has been a general shift in usage away from the simple voice and texting to IP data. And with increased LTE-enabled devices with larger screens, people increasingly are using smart devices to do what they used to do with their laptops. Those large screens, those larger data devices command a lot of LTE data. Here's the problem. They're not making new spectrum. So the challenge is to deliver a cost-effective coverage and capacity with limited spectrum, which suggests that not only is the evolution brewing, but more importantly, a revolution is building our wireless future. Building pain points. As most of you know, construction materials and reflective glass from LED and non-LED buildings make it difficult for macro networks to penetrate buildings. Most of us immediately think about commercial cellular, but not public safety. Public safety actually struggles to overcome the same challenges. So who's involved? Who are the stakeholders? Who does this most impact? Carriers care more about metrics of 9, so quality of service, total cost of ownership. Traditionally, they've been the decision makers. Building owners care about retaining tenants and compliance with municipal codes, such as public safety requirements. However, increasingly, building owners have had a strong say in what is being deployed in their buildings and why the DAS industry shifted from a single carrier solution in 2004 to today's multi-carrier solution. The public safety people care about being able to communicate with occupants and other first responders. A lack of good in-building coverage could be a fatal flaw. And of course, you and I know the building coverage needs to endure in any type of emergency. We have a stake as well, and we expect our smartphones to work anytime and anywhere. Increasingly, that means indoors more than outdoors. So what's the evolution? Part of it is small cells. Not so long ago, enabling coverage and capacity indoors was handled by deploying your first generation distributed antenna system. A distributed antenna system, to support, first of all, initially it was for a single carrier or a single technology. Today we've moved to multiple carriers, but more importantly also multiple technologies. So things like public safety, as well as LTE data and things like that, commonly run over one platform. What was the change in technology from what was one of the biggest changes in technology? We went from what we'll call an all-passive system, so a lot of coax with antenna, fed by one central point, to what we'll call an active-passive DAS, which is typically, fiber-fed active components, then some coax. Through that active-passive DAS today, we can actually run multiple carriers, multiple technologies, including things like LTE data, public safety two-way radio, along with all of the traditional commercial voice, and even your what we'll call your essential two-way radio, so your non-public safety in-house two-way radio, with the newer approach being active-passive, the smarter technology closer to the edge. We're actually able to run, all of these different technologies on a common platform. Now today, along came small cell. In response to DAS, which is typically optimized for larger venues, small cells were conceived as a low-cost alternative to enable coverage and capacity in residential and office environments. Residential femto cells are one way mobile operators can improve the quality of their subscriber cellular service. So a good example of that is, no coverage in your home. I'm a higher usage cell phone subscriber. They send out a femto cell. I can plug it in. I can light up my phone primarily for voice at this time, but there are some data options as well. And, again, that's more of on a residential side. On the other side, we have a pico cell, which is, in essence, a larger femto cell that is deployed into a business or small venue. So the typical pico cell is physically larger than a femto cell, has higher power output, and consequently has a longer range and an ability to support a larger area. Higher traffic capacity, more concurrent users. The central premise behind a pico cell is that they will be deployed to provide better indoor voice and data coverage on a licensed cellular band. So what drives evolution? Solving for these key needs: scale, fiber architecture for scalability, lower cost, and multi-service. So not only multiple cellular users, but also public safety. Evolution provides more tools for the densification toolbox. Densifying the network will be a toolbox. We believe that densifying a network is a toolbox approach. For example, we believe that when you look at all of the challenges that are posed by the end user, whether it's throughput, whether it's just having coverage, if it's in an arena, if it's in a airport or in a subway, there is not a single solution that will provide the necessary coverage and capacity. What we believe is that you have to look at each of these unique challenges and apply the correct tools. So even if we were to look quickly at a transportation hub, Transportation hubs have very different patterns. Example, an airport and a subway system. An airport has what I'll call a non-mobile mobile user. You go to an airport, you check in 2 hours early or an hour early, you go through security, you sit down, connect to a network, and expect to get work done in a stationary location up until you have to board, at which time you disconnect and you leave. In a subway, you're a very mobile user. You run in, you have about 2 minutes till the train gets there, you jump on a train, and within 30 seconds you're 6 blocks away, and you're no longer on that first sector. One is underground, one is above ground, right? So there's differences across the board on the types of usage patterns as well as accessibility to those end users. In addition to that, you get into other types of venues like large arenas or universities where there's a parking lot, there's building, there's indoor, and there's also kind of large areas where people congregate. When you look at all of that, it's pretty plain to see why you need to take a toolbox approach to densifying the networks. The densification toolbox, everyone loves a great debate. The wireless industry has really pitted DAS against small cell, and in the process, it's difficult to separate the truth from the hype. For instance, some say DAS is too expensive compared to small cell. At a recent event, the claim was made that small cells will be deployed, for example, in a stadium venue, at 1/10 to 1/20th the cost of a DAS. At the other end of the spectrum, an expert said that the limited concurrent sessions a small cell can support suggest that small cells won't work in many high-rises without the ceiling looking like Swiss cheese. As a rule of thumb, we believe that DAS to be ideal for very large installations, something like over 500,000 square feet, while small cells are ideal for smaller, maybe 25, 50,000 square feet, something like that. So again, that toolbox approach really is user and venue dependent, but the idea is that kind of go in, evaluate, listen, and apply the correct coverage approach to making sure that the network is densified. We also believe that leaves a pretty big gap. We believe that unique characteristics speak to case-by-case solutions, even more interesting to a hybrid approach. So the revolution, building our wireless future. Looking out beyond the next couple of years, we see a wireless network revolution. The industry literally is at the starting point of building the wireless network for the future, or at least the next 10 years. Operators are shifting to a strategy that relies less upon a macro network to one where radios are denser and closer to where the users are. I mentioned before, actives at the edge, fiber to the edge. These types of words are starting to become, more and more prevalent in the conversations that we have about the revolution of DAS or the revolution of network coverage as we go forward. With FirstNet, public safety industry seeks to build new broadband public safety network with survivability. Inside the building, new stakeholders are seeking ways to avoid rip and replace. This is even if when we look at all these solutions and to the best of our ability, we future prepare for technologies. Every couple of years, not necessarily new spectrum, although in many cases that is part of it, but the reuse of existing spectrum comes into play. And when you potentially reuse a legacy voice spectrum to support data applications, for example, that densification, that network needs to become more dense. Therefore, the equipment and the solution supporting that network would need to take on a whole new look. In many cases, based on the early days of DAS, when carriers used to do single carrier passive DAS only, to migrate to a high-speed data network for multiple carriers, or even just that single carrier, would require the RIP of that passive-only network and for it to be replaced with an active passive network that had all the appropriate filtering and conditioning for things like LTE, et cetera. Basically in sum, the key theme of the wireless future is do it once, do it right. And that marks a revolutionary point of change for our industry. Today, the in-building space is being driven by multiple influences. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that we're now what we call multi-tenant or neutral host, single infrastructure with multiple service and support pieces. A lot of decisions are made today around aesthetics and what that looks like. I mentioned earlier that, on one hand, there was a debate about small cell being less expensive, but on the other hand, there was a debate about my ceiling is going to look like Swiss cheese if I have, all these different, small cells in the ceiling. So, aesthetics have really become a big part of our industry. Backhaul, it's great to have a network that provides the coverage, but is the pipe big enough to make sure that there's not a bottleneck? It has to be repeatable. It has to be a repeatable design and deployment process with upgradability and expandability. More importantly, it has to be field upgradable and expandable. One of the frustration points of the industry, of our customers to the industry, is if something needs to be changed, how cumbersome is it? What type of downtime does the end user experience? Frankly, how in the way are we going to be upgrading our system? So, having a field upgradable and expandable thought to the future of DAS is very important. And, of course, we still have to make it work in an ROI, right? The business model still needs to meet the return on investment. It's unclear what we will wind up calling the next generation of in-building wireless networks, but what we believe is, at the very least, it's going to take on multiple different technologies being deployed simultaneously to make the best, the most upgradable, the most sustainable, and the most future-ready network for our customers. Do it once, do it right. I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, the one thing we always have to remember is that our customers, the customer, is the one that is put out of the way, so to speak, when a rip and replace or when an upgrade needs to take place. So doing it, taking into consideration all of the facts that are available and building out the right network the first time and future preparing it as best as possible is a key element to a satisfied customer. We believe that, in doing that, the next generation network, in-building network, will look vastly different from today's approach. Probably something like a fiber infrastructure backbone that stays in place while the end pieces and components are swapped out. So rather than replacing a bunch of cabling and infrastructure, just replace components that can be basically snapped off and snapped back in to an existing backbone. A network like this possesses the following key characteristics. It's scalable, it's multi-purpose, so it can support RF and IP services, including commercial cell, public safety, and Wi-Fi. It could also support things that are non-voice driven or even, non-quote-unquote traditional data-driven applications, so security cameras, building automation, and more. Power in the ceiling will add future services to existing infrastructure as we move active closer to the edge. Intelligence to deliver the network and user analytics to provide new RI business models, location capabilities for public safety, asset management for hospitals. These are all things that when we look toward the future and we look at this multi-service infrastructure, we believe building owners can start taking into account. I think that in many cases we're starting to get to the point where infrastructure, specifically in-building DAS infrastructure, starts to build its own ROI. not just for the carriers, not just for the Wi-Fi providers, but for the building owners. I think they can start to get to a point where the ROI becomes obvious. Hey, if I put this in once, I can do many things over my wireless infrastructure, and at the end of the day, start associating some dollars with that. But also know that they're putting it in once, and what would really need to be changed out is not the core, it's not the backbone, it's the ancillary parts that sit around the network that would only need to be changed. So it's not a whole lot of future work. So in summary, what I'd like to just kind of reiterate is the problem that we face today as an industry is a capacity crunch and usage spikes. Densification equals, what it provides coverage in areas difficult to reach with a macro. It provides better throughput for networks like LTE. It provides higher data rates. And also it provides that capacity in densely populated areas that are densely populated all the time, but it also gives you the opportunity to scale for areas that become densely populated based on a specific event or some type of occurrence. It also addresses outcomes. We'll address spectrum, be able to spread spectrum out in a more intelligent manner. So rather than just, blast a bunch of spectrum and continue to turn up power, we can actually take that spectrum and strategically place it and point it and fill areas that need to be filled in a more mature or a more responsible manner with greater outcome. It'll manage data traffic. It'll also manage traffic growth as we move forward. And again, going back to the ROI statement I made, I think it does monetize an investment, not only on the carrier side, but also on the enterprise side. I think it really starts to put some dollar amounts around what this infrastructure can provide. What that solution looks like, we don't believe there is a one-size-fits-all solution. We are 100% behind the idea of a toolbox approach, and that toolbox approach consists of the merger of DAS, small cell, macro network, and in many cases Wi-Fi coming together to build the correct tailored solution to solve up any problem. We do not believe that you can go into this thing with I have a solution looking for a problem. We believe you have to find the problem and develop the solution. And as a company or as an industry with many tools in our tool belt, being open-minded, listening, understanding, and applying the correct technology to solve a problem versus applying a technology for technology's sake is the right approach. So that toolbox approach is one that we will continue to talk about. You'll hear more about that as it also addresses many of the macro challenges that our industry faces. And we'll talk more about that on the other webinar here later this month. The market is changing, and with change comes disruption and opportunity for new products, for new technologies, for new opportunities in general, opportunities that we may not have considered. So, as we move to this fiber to the edge, active at the edge type of mentality in our industry, it doesn't limit us to just cell, data, Wi-Fi, and two-way radio. It opens up opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, for things like cameras and data collection and all these different things that enterprises are looking for. So, I think it's an exciting time. The revolution in our industry is just starting, and I think that it's really an exciting time to be in this industry and look toward these trends and listen to what the enterprise is asking for, so that we can not only solve what I'll call our core competent problems that we've been solving for years, but much like we've gone from a carrier solving for a carrier to a solution solving for multiple carriers, I think the next step in this process is going to a solution that solves for multiple carriers, but it also solves for multiple technologies. And the example I showed before of an infrastructure that takes that intelligence right to the edge provides a gateway into including multiple technologies into our cost, which ultimately provides a simple ROI for the enterprise. So, in summary, in closing, Solid has multiple tools in its toolbox, and we keep people connected and safe in a rapidly changing world. We look to continue to develop and deploy new tools so that everyone in our industry, our customers, the carriers, can take full advantage of all of the opportunity to capture data and use it in a more efficient manner. So, Lisa, that's basically it for me today.
That's great.
Actually, I would like, I'm sorry, Lisa, just one more slide. We mentioned earlier, I actually think it's the 21st. I think that it's not the 28th. But,
no, it's the 28th.
The 28th? Okay, great. We will be having an outdoor densification seminar like this one on May 28th. If you like what you heard today and you want to register to attend that one, we'll look forward to
actually, everyone is already registered to attend the next session. And I do have to confirm, I cannot even remember. I'm sorry. I have so many things going on with webinars these days. If it's the 21st or the 28th, everyone knows what they signed up for. Everyone who signed up today will be able to access the next session. And I know Mike might have wanted to add something about the questions that we had during the registration.
Yep, just some of the questions, and thanks, Dennis, very, very informative, and during the session itself. And if anybody has any further questions, feel free to get them into the chat as well. The Toolbox, is it a solution that Solid offers? Is that something that you guys do offer at this time?
The Toolbox, yeah. So I'll answer the question. The Toolbox is more of an approach. Our Toolbox consists of things like front haul and backhaul solutions, optical solutions, multi-carrier DAS solutions, public safety, two-way radio network solutions. And yes, absolutely, that is the way we approach all of our partners, all of our projects, by again, eyes wide open, kind of a holistic, what's the problem, and then come back with the solution. And that's really what we do have a product that we refer to as, for example, a newer product to our Toolbox would be something we call City DAS. City DAS is an extension for the outdoor. We'll talk more about this on the next call, but just to give you a brief look behind the curtain, City DAS is essentially taking RF network active components and putting them in things that look like maybe a street lamp and extending that coverage to a city street or a park where aesthetics were always a challenge. Things along those lines are part of our Toolbox approach, being able to not necessarily have to rely on a high tower to cover that area, but take that coverage, put it 8, 10 feet off the ground, make it look like something that's native to that environment, and extending coverage out over that. And obviously part of that approach would require, fiber back to some central point, and we also offer, technology to do that. So that's an example of Toolbox where we'll use the word co-locate RF sources, so head end, BTS, whatever you want to call it, and you could take that BTS and drive in-building equipment as well as on-street coverage, and then potentially also, if you had a courtyard or a larger area, you could also generate a high power, on the side of a building, macro type coverage over a large, for example, parking lot. So the combination of all of those technologies allows us to build what we call our Toolbox approach.
Okay, excellent. And so the next one also revolves around the next two actually revolve around the Toolbox. One is the timing on availability, and as you described it there, it's more of a not necessarily product-centric, but a solution-centric offering, and I guess the availability would be now?
That is accurate, correct. The Toolbox is an approach, and the products are all available today. And what I would say is anytime, going back to what I said earlier, it's more about listening to the problem and then solving it, not developing a technology and trying to solve, and trying to fit that in. So our approach is combination of products that we have today, listening to the problem, and then applying the correct solution.
Okay. And finally, on the questions on the toolbox, how does this impact the cost with adding extra network elements?
How does it impact the cost? I mean, we're depending. I would say partially unknown. What I mean by that is, how would we have solved data capacity concerns on a street, for example, or in a park, for example, earlier? Probably through a macro tower. So the question is, we're not really, are we kind of comparing the cost to that? Not really, because in the end it was just kind of a spray. That's kind of a spray, and that's kind of a spray approach to coverage. This, we're talking about, potentially putting up small cells along the park, or when you densify a network, you could be adding additional components. But in the grand scheme of things, the idea of putting an in-building network in a building was actually born out of two reasons. One, because there was no coverage in the building and the macro was inefficient. But two, it's far less expensive to bring coverage in building through a DAS than it is to try to improve the coverage in building by adding additional macro sites. So to answer that question, I would say I don't know that there's a defined cost right now, but given the alternative, which would be more macros, I would suspect that everybody would find it to be a more economical approach. So I think in the grand scheme of things, if the coverage is that important, this is the economically sound approach.
Okay, excellent. So a couple more things. One, just want to make sure that the next session is, everybody notes it is on the 28th. I think we may have had it noted as the 21st previously, but Dennis was correct. It is the 28th for the next session. And if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to reach out to either myself or Dennis, and we can tackle those questions that you have from this one or possibly the upcoming session during the next session.
Mike, I have
Dennis?
a question.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. What is full neutral host DAS? What is a full neutral host DAS system? Can I consider a DAS, bracket select band 850 megahertz and 1900 megahertz as a full neutral host system?
So yeah, neutral host means, I guess, if we were to look at this, the opposite, host neutral. So what we're really trying to, that word means that it's an infrastructure that can support multiple, I used the word carrier before, which is probably more of a U.S. term. So it could support multiple commercial cell providers. So for example, in the U.S., a neutral host would support Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and some two-way radio perhaps. It could support any combination of those hosts, right? In Canada, it could be Bell, Rogers, Telus, Wind. It could be all of those folks on one infrastructure. So it's kind of like it's the equivalent of a multi-tenant office building for DAS. So it can support multiple clients in one common infrastructure versus just one carrier over one infrastructure. So that's the definition of neutral host.
Great. Thanks, Dennis.
No problem.
Okay, so as the slide up there says, and I'm sorry about my confusion, I have 3 events on May 28th, so I'm really confused. The next webinar will be on the 28th of May. Everyone is already registered for both events, so you don't have to re-register. And I just want to highlight the last point on the slide, that we have 4 other recordings of previous webinars available on our website, and I will send out a follow-up email to everyone with links to those. A lot of the questions that I did see on registration were a lot more technical than what we addressed on the webinar today, and I do believe you'll find that they might be addressed on those webinars. We did a webinar on DAS network design and on PIM, so there's a lot of material already done. So thank you again, Mike and Dennis. and we'll look forward to the 28th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.